Welcome back to the Trust Show podcast. Today, we're kicking off part 3 of the Trust Premium book, Behaviors That Will Make Your Customers Trust You. And this chapter, chapter 12, introduces the first of 5 key behaviors like that would help you build real, lasting trust, understanding that the customer is not always right. Now, this might go against everything you've been taught as a salesperson or a professional, but if you want to be seen as a trusted advisor and not just a vendor that takes orders, you can't be afraid to push back when it's in the customer's best interest. In this chapter, we'll explain why honesty, even when uncomfortable, builds more trust than blind agreement ever will. And also, there's a quick note. I normally wrap up the season after 12 episodes, but this time I'm going to go all the way to the end of this book. By the time we finish this episode, we will be on page 180 out of 261, so we're getting close. Let's dive into chapter 12, The Customer is Not Always Right after this. Welcome to the Trust Show. I'm Yoram Solomon, your host, the author of the Book of Trust, and facilitator of the Trust Habits Workshop. My mission is simple. I want to help you form habits that build your trustworthiness, because the answer to this question will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you? Chapter 12. The customer is not always right. The idea that the customer is always right isn't limited to salespeople. It's a mindset that often affects professionals across fields, whether you're a photographer, plumber, accountant, or any other service provider interacting directly with clients. In the early days of your career, you may struggle with imposter syndrome, that nagging sense that you're not quite as competent as people expect you to be. This feeling can make you hesitant to push back on a client's request or to voice a professional opinion that might contradict what the client thinks they want. Instead, you defer to the client's judgment, assuming that challenging them would make you seem difficult or arrogant. In other words, you will give them exactly what they want, even if it doesn't make sense to you or you think that's not what they need. But in reality, the opposite is often true. When you have the confidence to disagree with the client and to express what you believe is genuinely in their best interest, it shows that you're serious about your work. Clients respect professionals who are willing to stand their ground because it signals that you're not just trying to please them and make a quick buck with a minimum friction. You're here to guide them. Paradoxically, this willingness to argue with the client can make them trust you more. The origins of the customer is always right. The mantra, the customer is always right, is rooted in old selling techniques. For decades, salespeople were trained to believe that agreeing with the customer was a fundamental rule of service. This philosophy was drilled into their heads: never argue with the customer. It was thought that any resistance could lose the sale, so salespeople were taught to adopt a passive, agreeable stance no matter what the customer wanted. This mentality may have worked in certain retail settings where customer satisfaction with a single purchase was the primary goal. However, as business practices evolved and clients began to seek deeper, more consultative relationships, the limitations of this approach became obvious. Blind agreement may lead to a quick sale but doesn't build long-term trust. Clients today are looking for advisors, not order takers, and they can easily tell when you're just telling them what they want to hear rather than offering real guidance. However, I might add that this is not true for all customers. Some really only want you to take the order and give them exactly what they goddamn asked for. The illusion of agreement. Let's start by examining why the customer is always right can be such a damaging philosophy. First and foremost, it assumes that the customer's perception of what they need is infallible. But in reality, customers come to you precisely because they need your expertise, knowledge, and perspective. They might think they know what they want, but often lack the technical understanding, industry knowledge, or experience to help them make the best decision. When you simply agree with whatever they say, you're doing them a disservice. You're giving them the illusion of agreement without the benefit of genuine advice. Consider a situation where a client asks for a product or service that, in your professional judgment, isn't suitable for their needs. Perhaps it's a solution that's too expensive for their budget, or maybe it doesn't align with their actual goals. If you operate under the customer is always right philosophy, you may feel compelled to sell them what they ask for. After all, you're just giving them what they want, right? But when that solution fails to meet their expectations or doesn't solve their problem, they won't remember that they insisted on it. They'll remember that you sold it to them. Instead of gaining their loyalty, you risk losing their trust. Customers value genuine advice. Clients aren't as easily fooled as we sometimes think. They can sense when you're simply saying what they want to hear rather than what you actually believe. This kind of disingenuous behavior erodes trust because it signals that you're more interested in the transaction than in their well-being. On the other hand, clients also know when you're being honest, even if that honesty means challenging them or contradicting their request. And when you're willing to say, actually, I don't think that's the best choice for you, it shows that you respect them enough to prioritize their needs over making a quick sale. This brings to mind a dinner I once had with a buyer from a Fortune 500 company. None of our salespeople liked dealing with him. He had a reputation of being demanding and dismissive. Yet, at that dinner, he surprised me. He leaned over and said, "I like you the most from your company." Startled, I asked why. "Because you're the only one who doesn't offer me whatever I ask for," he replied. "You're the only one who tells me when what I ask for is complete BS." In that moment, it became clear to me that clients appreciate honesty far more than they appreciate blind agreement. By pushing back on his requests, I showed him that I cared enough about his success to risk disagreeing with him. And he knew how uncomfortable he was making those disagreeing with him. That honesty created a foundation of trust that outlasted any single transaction. It was a reminder that a trusted advisor isn't someone who just nods and agrees, but someone who provides real guidance, even if it means saying something the client might not want to hear. From vendor to trusted advisor. When you adopt the mindset that the customer is always right, you risk positioning yourself as a vendor rather than a trusted advisor. Vendors take orders. Advisors give guidance. Clients are not hiring you to be an echo chamber for their ideas when they come to you. They're looking for your expertise. They want you to challenge their assumptions, to clarify their thinking, and to help them make better decisions. They expect you to be honest with them, not simply follow their lead. A trusted advisor understands that saying yes to every client's request isn't a sign of good service. It's a sign of insecurity. It shows a lack of confidence in your own judgment, and it suggests that you value short-term approval over long-term trust. On the other hand, when you're willing to say, "No, I don't think that's the right approach," you're demonstrating that you have a perspective and a professional standard that you stand by. This kind of forthrightness earns respect and builds credibility because it shows the client that you're invested in their success, not just in making a sale. The long-term value of integrity. Acting as if the customer is always right can compromise your integrity. By simply agreeing with the customer, you sacrifice your role as an advisor, choosing short-term convenience over long-term trust. But when you show integrity by giving honest feedback, even if it's feedback the customer doesn't want to hear, you're reinforcing your credibility and showing that you're in it for the right reasons. Ultimately, trust is built on genuine connections and on respecting both yourself and the client. When you put the client's actual needs above their stated desires, you're showing that you value their success over simply making a sale. This approach doesn't just make you a better advisor, it also builds a deeper, more resilient trust with your clients. Keeping an open mind. Sometimes the customer is right. Of course, there is a balance to be struck. Just because the customer isn't always right doesn't mean they're always wrong either. Part of being a trusted advisor is recognizing when the client's insights and perspectives are valuable and acknowledging when you might be the one who's mistaken. Keeping an open mind allows you to continue learning and evolving as a professional, and it demonstrates humility and respect for the client's input. Sometimes they'll surprise you with a perspective you hadn't considered, and listening to them thoughtfully will only strengthen the trust between you. The trust premium. Professionals and salespeople who understand that the customer is not always right tend to be trusted more. They know that sometimes doing the hard thing, challenging the client, suggesting alternatives, or saying no is necessary to build a foundation of trust. And this trust brings with it a trust premium. Clients who see you as a reliable advisor who prioritizes their needs are willing to pay more, invest in longer-term relationship, and refer you to others. You become more than just a service provider. You become a trusted partner. So, the next time a client asks for something that doesn't align with your expertise or judgment, remember, your role is not simply to deliver what they ask for, but to advise them on what will truly serve their interests. Trust is built by doing what's right for the client, even when it's not what they initially want to hear. I want to remind you of something that I wrote in the introduction to this book. I conducted a survey in which I described a contractor who bid on your home renovation project. The description included, he listens carefully to what you need, makes suggestions, and even prevents you from ordering what you don't need, even though he could make more money. In other words, he didn't operate under the rule that the customer is always right. And what was his reward for realizing the customer was not always right? A trust premium of 29.6%. Do's and don'ts. Do listen carefully to understand the customer's true needs. Do provide honest and professional feedback, even when it contradicts the customer's request. Do prioritize long-term trust over short-term approval. Do explain your reasoning clearly and respectfully when challenging a customer's idea. Do position yourself as a trusted advisor, not just an order taker. Do assess whether the customer genuinely needs advice or simply wants their request fulfilled. Do offer alternatives when rejecting a customer's request to show you value their goals. Do adapt your approach to match the customer's level of trust and engagement. Do use tact and empathy when addressing misunderstandings or unrealistic expectations. Do value integrity and professionalism above simply making a sale. Don't assume every customer wants or values unsolicited advice. Don't agree with the customer just to avoid conflict. Don't compromise your professional standards to appease a demanding client. Don't dismiss the customer's perspective without thoughtful consideration. Don't sell a product or service you know isn't suitable for the customer's needs. Don't prioritize quick sales over genuine advice and guidance. Don't shy away from difficult conversations that are necessary for the customer's success. Don't be defensive when the customer challenges your perspective. Don't let fear of losing the client undermine your role as a professional advisor. And don't overlook that some customers truly just want what they ask for. Respect that when appropriate. And this brings us to the end of Chapter 12, the first one in Part 3 of the Trust Premium, where we focus on behaviors that will help you earn and keep your customers' trust. In this chapter, I challenge the long-standing belief that the customer is always right. While it may feel safer to simply agree with clients, true trust is built when you're willing to speak up, offer honest feedback, and guide them, even if that means pushing back. Now, being a trusted advisor means knowing when to say no, when to offer alternatives, and when to challenge ideas that don't serve your customer's best interest. Blind agreement with the customer may win short-term approval, but integrity and professional courage are what creates long-term trust. And with it, the trust premium. One thing I should add, and I talked about that in this chapter, is that not all customers are the same, not all situations are the same. Trust is relative, trust is personal. That's the third law of trust. And trust is contextual. That's the second law of trust. So always remember that some customers will still want you to just take an order. Just sell me what I wanted. And that's fine. And you need to adjust to that. And some customers may actually offer a perspective that you didn't think about, and you would need to listen and maybe even accept that you are wrong and correct what you suggest to them. Those build trust. Next week, I'll continue with Chapter 13, the second behavior, the no BS approach to building trust. It's a deep dive into honesty, transparency, and what it really means to keep it real with your clients. I hope this made you think a little differently about trust and trust premium. May trust be with you. This was The Trust Show. What would you like to know about trust and trustworthiness? Let me know and I'll answer it in a future episode. I would love to hear from you. Email me at yoram@thetrustshow.com. If you like this episode, subscribe to the show so you will automatically get notified when I release a new episode. Rate it. Write a review for this podcast because those ratings help not only you, but also others looking for podcasts just like this. If you're looking for more resources to learn about how to build trust, be trusted, or know who to trust, look up my workshops, online courses, books, or go to my website, trusthabits.com. And remember that the answer to these two questions will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you? And can you trust me? Thank you for listening or watching The Trust Show.